Imagine waking up to a silence so absolute it feels heavy. The air is so cold that every breath you take burns the inside of your lungs. You are entirely alone. There is no village, no family, and no shelter waiting for you at the end of the day. There is only a vast, empty, white horizon. If you stop moving, the cold will seep into your joints and freeze your blood. If you keep moving, your body will rapidly burn through its last remaining calories. This wasn't a temporary emergency. For our ancestors, this was the baseline of existence during the darkest winters of our history. And here is the unsettling truth. When modern humans think of survival, we think of clever tools, hunting, and building fires. But when ancient humans were pushed to the absolute edge of isolation, survival wasn't about cleverness. It was about crossing boundaries that would make a modern person freeze with horror. To survive the quietest, coldest moments of our past, our ancestors did things that blur the line between human and monster. Let's start with the quiet desperation of starvation. Most people think surviving off the land means hunting game and picking berries, but in the dead of winter, there are no berries. And even if you manage to kill a lean animal like a rabbit, eating it exclusively will actually kill you. Your body cannot survive on lean protein alone. Without fat, your liver fails, and you starve even with a full stomach. This is a medical reality known as rabbit starvation. To prevent this, isolated humans had to consume things we would find completely unthinkable. When resources ran out, they couldn't afford to be picky. They would take the bones of animals that had been dead for weeks, smash them open with heavy stones, and boil the rotting, coagulated marrow inside to extract every drop of grease. But it gets worse. To get vital nutrients like vitamin C in a frozen wasteland, our ancestors couldn't eat fresh plants. Instead, they found them in the only place they existed, inside the stomachs of the animals they killed. Some researchers believe ancient humans consumed chyme, the semi-digested, highly acidic contents of a dead herbivore's stomach. It was bitter, foul-smelling, and semi-liquid. But in a world without green leaves, it was the only thing standing between an isolated human and a slow, agonizing death from scurvy. But physical hunger was only part of the nightmare. The social cost of survival was far darker. We like to think of ancient humans as tightly knit tribes who took care of their own, and most of the time they did. But when resources dwindled to nothing, survival became a brutal mathematical equation. If a small, isolated group was traveling across a frozen landscape and someone slowed them down, an elderly grandparent, a sick sibling, or a newborn baby, the math became simple. Keep them with you and everyone dies. Leave them behind and the rest might live. Archaeological evidence and historical accounts of extreme survival suggest that in the darkest times, abandonment was a recognized strategy. Imagine the psychological toll of making that choice. Walking away into the blizzard, leaving a loved one sitting by a dying fire, knowing that within hours, the cold would claim them in the dark. You had to block out the cries, you had to keep walking. Because in the ancient world, mercy was a luxury that only the well-fed could afford. And when abandonment wasn't enough, some went even further. At a site called Gough's Cave in Somerset, England, scientists uncovered human remains dating back nearly 15,000 years. The bones tell a terrifying story. They show clear evidence of cannibalism. But this wasn't a quick, panicked act of desperation. The marks on the bones show that the bodies were meticulously butchered. The meat was stripped, the bones were cracked open for marrow, and the skulls were carefully hollowed out and shaped into cups. Some researchers believe this may have had a ritualistic element, but the underlying driver was clear: extreme, desperate survival. In the depths of winter, when the herds disappeared and the snow piled high, the dead became the only source of life for those left behind. To survive alone, our ancestors had to look at their companions not just as family, but potentially as the next meal. But perhaps the most intimate horror of ancient survival is carved into the walls of caves across Europe. In places like Gargas Cave in France, there are hundreds of ancient hand stencils blown onto the stone walls using red and black pigments. But when you look closely, a chilling pattern emerges. Many of these hands are missing fingers. Some are missing just the tips, others are missing entire digits, leaving only the thumb. For decades, scientists have debated why. Some suggest it was a sign language or a ritual mutilation, but others point to a much more practical and agonizing reality: frostbite. If you are alone in the sub-zero wild and a single mistake leaves your fingers exposed to the air, they will turn black. The tissue dies, and gangrene quickly follows. If the infection spreads to your arm, you will die. With no medicine and no doctors, the only cure was immediate amputation. Imagine sitting alone in a dark cave, heating a stone blade in a small fire, and pressing it down onto your own flesh to hack off your own blackened fingers to save your life. Every handprint on those walls may not be an art piece. It might be a tally of the pieces of themselves our ancestors had to sacrifice just to see the next spring. When we look back at these ancient humans, it is easy to judge them through a modern lens of comfort and morality. But we have to remember, they didn't have the luxury of our choices. They lived in a world where the margin between life and death was as thin as a single layer of animal hide. They ate the unthinkable, abandoned those they loved, consumed the dead, and cut away pieces of their own bodies, not out of cruelty, but out of an unyielding, desperate refusal to die. Tonight, when you turn on your heater, cook a warm meal, and lock your door, remember the sheer weight of what it took to get you here. You are the descendant of the survivors. The ones who looked into the coldest, darkest corners of existence, did what had to be done, and kept walking.